Today we are here to talk about evented plague. So essentially this is an enhancement in Kubernetes. So this is a kubelet specific feature, a feature that actually involves both kubelet and container runtimes. So the way Kubernetes works is that it uses a node daemon kubelet, and on the node the container runtime is also another thing that runs. So from the side of the container runtime, what happens as of today is that the kubelet uh, periodically relists the pods that are running on the machine. So essentially it asks the container runtime every 1 second about tell me the list of the containers that are running on the machine. And that is how from that information it tries to tell us about the pod status. This is done through an implementation which we called pod lifecycle event generator, and the current implementation that is there in the kubelet, it does a periodic relisting at 1 second interval of the listing of the containers and the pod sandboxes running on the container runtime. The container runtime can be anything like cryo, containerd, or Docker, shim, or anything of that sort. But any OCI specific container runtimes that Kubernetes supports will actually have this list containers and list pod sandbox API calls, and these calls will be done periodically on every 1 second. So to avoid that, as you can see that every 1 second is not a very good idea, because as your nodes get more dense, or I would say that each node having more number of pods to run in, the resource consumption gets pretty high. The memory usage also gets pretty high. And we all know that this is not the best way to do that, to keep a loop for two distinct components to keep signaling between themselves about the pod statuses or the container statuses. So we introduced this proposal. This is currently in beta state as of Kubernetes 1.27. What it does is the container runtime now supports gRPC events. So this is what used to happen before with generic plague, as we call it. And with the introduction of evented plague as a beta, this is what usually happens. So there's an event that comes from the container runtime through the CRI API. So every time containerd creates a new container, it will send an event to kubelet, instead of kubelet having to poll and ask about these statuses each time. So this is something that went in as alpha in Kubernetes 1.26, and from 1.27 it's beta. So this is how it essentially works. So it uses gRPC streaming in the backend and just Golang channels to ensure that the events that are coming from the container runtime reaches the kubelet, and periodically it also does a relisting, but the relisting interval is much high right now. If you use this with the feature get evented plague enabled, it is something like 5 minutes instead of what it was like 1 second before. So this is the gist of the enhancement. I didn't have slides to present, but this enhancement proposal has all the information that you would typically need. We had some, from the implementation point of view, there is a cache that caches the pod statuses, and when the pod statuses used to come in before in generic plague, the caching mechanism also had to be changed, because now the caching is not stateless like it was before. It is stateful and it's event driven right now. Before it used to be stateless, and it used to be that every time there's a list pod sandbox status or list container status, the cache would get overridden and updated. There's a cache inside kubelet to do all of that. I have a local cluster running. I am not sure if you guys will be able to see it. Yeah, this is running on my laptop only. So this has the evented plague feature get enabled. So what I will quickly do is show you a very simple pod. This pod just does nothing, just sleeps for 1 second. Okay. I will create this pod. Uh, if you, oh, okay, it was too fast. I'll delete the pod, apply it. Yeah, if you see the container is creating, then it goes to running and then completed. Now, this is because this is the evented implementation. And if I run the same thing, without the events, I yeah, I'll run it without the events. Give it a minute. And then what will happen is this pod will directly jump from container runtime to completed and never see the running state, because what it essentially does is I set the relisting interval to 10 seconds. So if I set it to 10 seconds in a generic plague, it will what it will do is after 10 seconds it will do the relisting, and so it doesn't have any evented mechanism for itself to know when the pod has actually stopped. So that way, if I set it to 10 seconds, although the pod was like creates a pod, sleeps for 1 second and then dies away, it still has to wait for the next release to occur. I hope this is up. Yeah, if you see, this is container creating. I had forced it the relisting period to get it to 10 seconds, although in a real one it will be 1 second. But due to memory pressure, or when there are a lot of pods running in a cluster, due to the high amount of CPU pressure, it's not always 1 second, it gets skewed. So just to simulate that kind of thing. So if you see that it missed the running status, because when the next release happened, the pod was no more running, and it just used the next state that was available. So yeah, pretty much this is what I had up for any questions that you would like to ask. Any questions?
So when a pod dies away, or when the container dies away, how will that state gets back to the runtime?
So we have four types of events right now. One is container created, one is container started, one is container stopped, and the other is container died or container exited, something of that sort. I don't remember the exact terminology. So with the help of those events, it actually keeps track of the pods that are coming in from container runtime. So the runtime essentially, whenever it creates a, so if you think from a perspective of the pod, there will be many containers running inside the pod also. So for each container, this thing works. So essentially, for every container, these events have to go in. It's a very fundamental part of kubelet itself, and essentially Kubernetes itself. It's the pod lifecycle event generator, and this is used across like the CLI, Kube API server, Kube controller manager. Everybody consumes the events from that plague, and previously the generic plague uses the relisting one, and with evented plague, if you turn on the feature gate, it's evented plague true, then you get the evented implementation of CRI. So you have to enable it from CRI side as well, otherwise this feature don't work. That's a thing, because both of the parties have to know that it's an evented implementation. Yeah.
Will it impact the graceful period of 30 seconds?
No, it should not. Essentially, graceful period of 30 seconds is after these things happen.
Oh,
so
okay.
after the status comes, then the graceful period comes. So this is a lower level than that. Okay. Thanks everyone. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Swarup. Thanks for that talk. So